Good evening. Welcome to part 6, I believe, of the Scrolls of Ezekiel, going through uh, chapters 19 through 21. Hopefully, because we are going to sit in chapter 20 for a minute tonight. Um, it's a very special chapter. It has a lot of revelation to it, and importance. We are still here in this first section of these scrolls, um, pointing to Jerusalem's fall. And just to summarize, we're going to be going over the parable of the lion and the parable of the vine in chapter 19. Chapter 20 covers a record of rebellion, basically a blaspheming of the Sabbath. And chapter 21 is pointing to Babylon being used for the Most High. So he weaponizes Babylon for his glory. So we're going to come back to this in a minute. And Liz, you can go ahead and start reading first verses 1 through, let's see, verses 1 through 9.
Okay. Moreover, take up a lamentation for the princes of Israel, and say, What is your mother? A lioness? She lay down among the lions. Among the young lions she nourished her cubs. She brought up one of her cubs, and he became a young lion. He learned to catch prey, and he devoured man. The nations also heard of him. He was trapped in their pit, and they brought him with chains to the land of Egypt. When she saw that she waited, that her hope was lost, she took another of her cubs and made him a young lion. He roved among the lions and became a young lion. He learned to catch prey. He devoured man. He knew their desolate places and laid waste their cities. The land with its fullness was desolated by the noise of his roaring. Then the nations set against him from the provinces on every side and spread their net over him. He was trapped in their pit. They put him in a cage with chains and brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him in nets, that his voice should no longer be heard on the mountains of Israel.
All right, thank you. So, just starting out with some references here. Oh, I don't know why that came up wrong, but we'll get to that later. With this historical reference, first off, of what was going on during that time and the sons or the kings that were affected. So we have Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. But so you can write this down just for reference. Because again, I want to put a focus also on like the connections, not so much the historical part, although those are confirmations or second witnesses, but just for the sake of time, since there are a lot of things that I wanted to cover tonight. So we'll go to um these slides here. And as I mentioned, so we have cub number 1 mentioned in the first the first portion, which is verse 3, is speaking of Jehoahaz, who was exiled by the Pharaoh Necho. And this is the portion where it's listed, Second Chronicles 36, 1 through 4. And then cub number 2 is Jehoiachin, who was exiled by Nebuchadnezzar. And that's listed in Second Kings 24, 8 through 17. So I just wanted to pull this up again because I know that we've looked at it a few times, and it again shows the times of these kings. So we have Jehoahaz here, and then Jehoiachin. Jehoiakim, Jehoahaz is the grandfather of Jehoiachin. Um, We have Jehoiakim in the middle, who worked for for Nebuchadnezzar. And so once he died and Jehoiachin came into his reign, he at first was working for Nebuchadnezzar and then turned his back on him, and that's when he went, I believe he went to the king of Egypt, and that's when he went in and exiled him. And then we have Zedekiah, who also was a puppet for the crown at that time. All right, so let's read some connections. And these also are reviews of the final exile that took place. So that was my mistake. So the two that I mentioned in the slide, those were the ones for Jehoiachin and Jehoahaz. These right here are references to Zedekiah. So Jeremiah 52, 10 through 11, and 25 through 27. And then 2 Kings 25, 5 through 7. Let's see. Okay, so with verse 2, speaking of the lioness, so the lioness is basically the royal line. That's what you can look at it as. So David's the line of David, basically. So Zephaniah 3 verses 1 through 4 is a connection to verse 2, and it says, "Woe to her who is rebellious and polluted, to the oppressing city. She has not obeyed his voice, she has not received correction. She has not trusted in the Most High, she has not drawn near to her Elohim. Her princes in her midst are roaring lions. Her judges are evening wolves that leave not a bone till morning. Her prophets are insolent, treacherous people. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law." So this, of course, is just a review of, what Israel has chosen as a people to do and not turning away from their sinful ways. So these are the other precepts that I referenced for the two kings, Jehoahaz and Jehoiachin, in Chronicles and Kings. And this is also, basically verses 3 through 7 is what the next few connections are going to be. So we have Jeremiah 22, 13 through 17, that says, "Woe to him who builds his house by unrighteousness and his chambers by injustice, who uses his neighbor's service without wages and gives him nothing for his work, who says, I will build myself a white house with spacious chambers and cut out windows for it, paneling it with cedar and painting it with vermilion. Shall you reign because you enclose yourself in cedar? Did not your father eat and drink and do justice and righteousness? Then it was well with him. He judged the cause of the poor and needy. Then it was well. Was not this knowing me, says the Adon? Yet your eyes and your heart are nothing but your covetousness for shedding innocent blood and practicing oppression and violence." Once again, just another review of the practices the Israelites had adopted and were living by. We also have Amos 6, verse 8, that says, "The Adon Elohim has sworn by himself. The Adon Elohim of hosts says, I abhor the pride of Jacob and hate his palaces. Therefore, I will deliver up the city and all that is in it." And then we also have Ezekiel 12:19. So a second witness in Ezekiel. "And say to the people of the land, thus says the Adon Elohim to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the land of Israel, they shall eat their bread with anxiety and drink their water with dread, so that her land may be emptied of all who are in it, because of the violence of all those who dwell in it." And we know that Israel, and even the two houses, so Jacob, the house of Jacob being the two houses, the two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, they're referenced as her, the two sisters, the adulterous sisters, Jacob as a whole, the mother. So again, the lioness here. Then for verses 8 and 9, I have Jeremiah, Jeremiah, let me see. No, sorry, Lamentations 4:20. So it says, the breath of our nostrils, the anointed of the Adon, was caught in their pits, of whom we said, under his shadow we shall live among the nations. And then Jeremiah 36, 30 through 31 says, therefore, thus says the Adon concerning Jehoiakim, king of Judah, he shall have no one to sit on the throne of David, and his dead body shall be cast out to the heat of the day and the frost of the night. I will punish him, his family, and his servants for their iniquity, and I will bring on them, on the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and on the men of Judah, all the doom that I have pronounced against them, but they did not heed. So this is because Jehoiakim, let me go back to the timeline here. Jehoiakim's actually, now that I let me go back and correct myself. Jehoiakim's son was not the one who succeeded him. So he is not the father of Jehoiachin. Jehoiachin was then, I believe, his nephew. It was his brother's son who was the one who was placed on the throne after him. So that's why that's that reference is there. Still of the line of David, nevertheless. All right, so with that being said, we can just complete, yeah, we can complete the chapter. So you can read 10 through 14 is.
Okay. Your mother was like a vine in your bloodline, planted by the waters, fruitful and full of branches because of many waters. She had strong branches for scepters of rulers. She towered in stature above the thick branches, and was seen in her height amid the dense foliage. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried her fruit. Her strong branches were broken and withered. The fire consumed them, and now she is planted in the wilderness, in a dry and thirsty land. Fire has come out from a rod of her branches and devoured her fruit, so that she has no strong branch, a scepter for ruling. This is a lamentation and has become a lamentation.
All right, thank you. So we see that now we have Israel referenced as a tree. And I know that we spoke about this with the other parable in chapter 17 last week. This one is a little bit different also. Last week we had the eagle that was plucking out the fruit from the tree, and this week it's just speaking of the branches and the roots of the trees being uprooted. So we have here Ezekiel 9:19-10 that says, your mother was like a vine in the vineyard planted by the water, fruitful and full of branches by reason of abundant water. So the mother vine is David's line, the royal line once again. Powerful branches and rods are the strong kings of Judah, the ones who the ones that actually were righteous, which we know that was only a handful of kings out of the 20 something that reigned over Judah. And then verse 12 that says, but the vine was plucked up in fury, cast down to the ground. The east wind dried up its fruit. They were stripped off and withered. As for its strong stem, fire consumed it. And these kings were as flawed as their wicked predecessors. They could not save the people from destruction. Instead, they led them to it. So you see the stark difference here between the trees from being roots that went deep into the waters, surrounded by waters, because of waters, as it says in the scriptures, and how they ended up dry and desolate and in a desert land, which, of course, Egypt was just that. All right, so some connections for these verses. Let me scroll down. We have Psalm 80, 8 through 11 says, and this is for, yeah, just the portion as a whole, because it's only 4 verses. You have brought a vine out of Egypt. You have cast out the nations and planted it. You prepared room for it and caused it to take deep root, and it filled the land. The hills were covered with its shadow, and the mighty cedars with its boughs. She sent her boughs to the sea and her branches to the river. Tying it in with the how it started, basically. Hosea 2, 2 through 5, bring charges against your mother. Bring charges, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. She put away her harlotries from her sight. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked and expose her, as in the day she was born, and make her like a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. I will not have mercy on her children, for they are the children of harlotry. For their mother has played the harlot. She who conceived them has behaved shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. Of course, we know that Israel started out very rich, having a lot that they were able to plunder from the Egyptians when they left Egypt. And even after, throughout all of the wars and everything that took place, um, each time that there was a war, the kings were able to plunder the goods of each of the lands that they fought against. But then when famine came, that's when they started to rely on the other nations and make treaties with them, and saw them as essentially as their savior. Then we also have Hosea 13:15 that says, though he is fruitful among his brethren, an east wind shall come. The wind of the Adon shall come up from the wilderness. Then his spring shall become dry, and his fountain shall be dried up. He shall plunder the treasury of every desirable prize. Keeping with the same theme about what would happen, and how it's the Most High Himself who did this, who exiled them. Jeremiah 31:28, and it shall come to pass that as I have watched over them to pluck up, to break down, to throw down, to destroy and to afflict, so I will watch over them to build and to plant, says the Most High. Hosea 3:4, for the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. So, and we're gonna see also in chapter 21 how this also connects, because it speaks about how both the king and the priest would be affected by the exile for their acts, what they were doing. Then and Liz said that this also connects with Romans 11, and yes, I absolutely agree, because of that chapter in particular having to do with being grafted in, and also how your blood heritage doesn't necessarily count you in for salvation just because of who you are connected to. You could be of blood relation as far as being in the bloodline of Israel or Judah and still be cut off for not having your heart right with the Most High and not following His commands. Yes, exactly. And being broken off, if not, and in covenant. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Liz. Um, we also have Psalm 110 and Numbers 24. So Psalm 110 and 2 says, the Adon shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion, rule in the midst of your enemies. And then Numbers 24:17, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab and destroy all the sons of tumult. So in the midst of all of this, even though the land was uprooted, the people were uprooted, there was still signs for who was to come, which is our Messiah. So it always points back to him, that in the midst of the desolation, he would be the one to break them out of it eventually, and in a spiritual sense more than anything else. So that's chapter 19. It was pretty short, but like I said, we are going to sit in Ezekiel 20 for a minute today, just because it is a long chapter. Not only is it a long chapter, but also there are a lot of connections here to make. So, Liz, I don't know if you are able to read again.
I am.
Okay. So we can just, let me see. I'm trying to think what's the best part to stop in. So we can stop at verse 12. Yeah, because I'm gonna talk about something briefly and then we'll jump right into the Sabbath portions.
Awesome. Yay. I love this chapter. Okay. So up to
Up to verse
16.
13.
Oh no, 13, you said.
12. Well, read 12,
Oh,
through 12.
okay. All right. So it came to pass in the 7th year, in the 5th month, on the 10th day of the month, that certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of the Adon, and sat before me. Then the word of the Adon came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel, and say to them, Thus says the Adon Elohim, Have you come to inquire of me? As I live, says the Adon Elohim, I will not be inquired of by you. Will you judge them, Son of man? Will you judge them? Then make known to them the abominations of their fathers. Say to them, Thus says the Adon Elohim, on the day when I chose Israel, and raised my hand in an oath to the descendants of the house of Jacob, and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, I raised my hand in an oath to them, saying, I am the Adon your Elohim. On that day I raised my hand in an oath to them to bring them out of the land of Egypt into a land that I had searched out for them, flowing with milk and honey, the glory of all lands. Then I said to them, Each of you throw away the abominations which are before his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Adon, your Elohim. But they rebelled against me and would not obey me. They did not they did not all cast away the abominations which were before their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Then I said, I will pour out my fury on them and fulfill my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned before the Gentiles among whom they were. In those sight I had made myself known to them, to bring them out of the land of Egypt. Therefore I made them to go out of the land of Egypt, and brought them into the wilderness, and I gave them my statutes, and showed them my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. Moreover, I also gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am the Adon who sanctifies them. Amen. You are muted, Steph.
Sorry. Thank you. And I said, we see a little preview here already of what Ezekiel is going to continue to speak to the people about the Sabbath. But first off, I just wanted to let me come back over here again. Um, this was something that stood out to me, starting in verse 9, and in this chapter as a whole, we see in verse 9, 14, 22, and 44, we're going to see, but I acted for the sake of my name. This is something that um, the psalmist used to pray on the basis of the writings of the prophets, which was for the sake of his name, which is an ongoing theme among also our Messiah's teachings, as well as the epistles and even the visions of John. So I'm gonna show you all. I found this that I found to be pretty interesting. That we see the word for his namesake, basically, in the ESV in particular, although the other translations have it in the same way. And I have a whole like multiverse review just to show you guys how often you see that basically what the Most High desired was for his name to be glorified. So a lot of the things, a lot of the judgment that he withheld from the sons of Israel was because of his great name. So I just wanted to, just so you guys can see, from First Samuel. So it says, "For the Adon will not forsake his people for his great name's sake, because it hath pleased the Adon to make you his people." Liz says, he also uses that when he makes mention bringing us through the fire for his name's sake. Yes, yes, exactly. Everything is for him to be glorified, because at the end of the day, if we also give in and lean into that going through the fire and refinement process, then we come out as a testimony for his glory. That's what it that was the purpose from the beginning, from creation. Which is why there's also scriptures that say if the rocks cry out, I mean, if the people don't cry out, the rocks are gonna cry out. I think that was Messiah himself who said that. So yeah. So we see some Psalms here, and there's more. I just included a few that I found, and just wanted to again display them. So we have Psalm 23, Psalm 25, Psalm 79. Then if we come down, Isaiah also said it a few times. Ezekiel says it in another chapter, in chapter 36. Daniel also said it. So Daniel was praying and he was saying, "O Adon, hear, O Adon, forgive. O Adon, hearken and do, defer not for thine own sake. O my Allahim, for thy city and thy people are called by thy name." So they would appeal to the Most High by reminding him that this is for his glory. So we see also once again in Jeremiah. And I think I saw also Hosea and Micah, and I want to say Habakkuk too. Also mention it in other translations. Again, this is just I believe was the ESV, was that chart that I showed you. So we have Matthew 10:22. So this is Messiah now that had spoken it as well. "And he shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith." Oh, this may be written differently, or maybe I didn't include the right verse for Matthew 9. Oh no, it was actually 19. I'm not gonna fix it, but if you want to write it down, Matthew 19:29 is also one that has "for his name's sake." Then Matthew 24:9, Mark 13:13, Luke 22:12, 17. So you get the idea. You see it here, Messiah also. And then we have it in Acts, in Romans, in two books of First John. So I will write to you at First John 2:12. "I will write to you, little children, because your sins are forgiven you for his name's sake." Third John 1:7, "Because that for his name's sake they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles." And then Revelation 2:3, "And hast borne and hast patience, for my name's sake hast labored and hast not fainted." And this is again a reference to his people who endured. So once again, the point of all of those connections is to show that ultimately this was all for the sake of the Most High being glorified. Every act, everything that came to pass, what he allowed and what he did not. All right. So also for chapter 20, and I don't know if I ended up, yes, I did pull it up. We have the whole of Psalm 106, and it's a long psalm, so I'm not going to read all of it. I do have a few. So you see is it 48 verses. But this psalm is like a good summation of the acts of the Israelites, where it basically recaps everything that the Most High did and also ties in with how they profaned the Sabbath and why they were cut off or scattered as a result. So we're gonna go into these connections now. Starting with verse 3, I have Matthew 15:8 and 9, Proverbs 28 and 9, and Psalm 50:15 through 21. So Matthew 15:8 and 9 says, "These people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." So if we just go back to recap or to review again, "Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, Thus says the Adon, have you come to inquire of me? As I live, says the Adon Elohim, I will not be inquired of you." So he's rejecting them. He's rejecting advising them because of what they've been doing, how they've turned away from him. So Proverbs 28:9 says, "One who turns away from his ear from hearing the law, even his prayer is an abomination." So he is not going to hear you if you are turning away from his statutes and his commandments. Unfortunately, that is the honest truth. The Most High wants our obedience over any sacrifice that we would make for the good, of serving Him. He wants our obedience, and obedience is tied to sacrifice in that way. But you can't say that, and especially in under the Levitical priesthood, they were perhaps not being obedient by not loving their neighbor, yet they were still going into the Holy of Holies and well, before going into the Holy of Holies, making those sacrifices of atonement. So we also have Psalm 50:15 through 21. Yes, obedience is better than sacrifice. It says, "Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me." But to the wicked, the Matthew precept was 15, verse 8 and 9. But to the wicked, the Elohim says, "What right have you to declare my statutes or take my covenant in your mouth, seeing you hate instruction and cast my words behind you? When you saw a thief, you consented with him and have been a partaker with adulterers. You give your mouth to evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I kept silent. You thought that I was altogether like you, but I will rebuke you and set them in order before your eyes." This sounds a lot to me like not loving your neighbor. So, as we know, that's one of the two greatest commandments: love the Most High and love your neighbor as yourself. So on the two, hang the law and the prophets, and we see confirmation of that all throughout the scriptures. Acts 7, 5 through, Acts 7, 51 through 52 says, "You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears. You always resist the Holy Spirit as your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who foretold the coming of the just one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers." So again, this is just a confirmation of what was being spoken to the Israelites even after Messiah, because they continued the practices of the royal crown, or yeah, the Judahite crown, even after his death. Now, oh, actually, and Acts 7 was a connection to verse 4. So, will you judge them, Son of Man? Will you judge them? Then make known to them the abominations of their fathers. So that's exactly what that portion of Acts was doing. Now, for verse 5, we have Exodus 6, 6 through 7, and Isaiah 41, 8 through 9. So Exodus says, "Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am the Adon. I will bring you out from under from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you as my people, and I will be your Elohim. Then you shall know that I am the Adon, your Elohim, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And Isaiah says, but you, Israel, are my servants, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend. You, whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest regions, and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not cast you away. And this again is connecting to verse 5 that speaks about them having been chosen specifically by him. Verses 6 through 7, we have Exodus 3:8, Jeremiah 32 and 22, and Leviticus 18:3. So Exodus says, so I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Jeremiah 32, you have given them this land of which you swore to their fathers to give them, a land flowing with milk and honey. And that's because, once again, verses 6 and 7 speak about, it's a recap of what he did for them. Leviticus 18:3, according to the doings of the lands of Egypt where you dwelt, you shall not do, and according to the doings of the land of Canaan where I am bringing you, you shall not do, nor shall you walk in their ordinances. And this was him giving them a warning, that he had already told them, each of you throw away the abominations which are before your eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. He gave them clear instructions of what not to do. Okay, so going back, as I mentioned, where it starts with verse 9, for his namesake, we have Psalm 106 as well, verses 6 through 10. So it says, we have sinned with our fathers, we have committed iniquity, we have done wickedly. Our fathers in Egypt did not understand your wonders. They did not remember the multitude of your mercies, but rebelled by the sea, the Red Sea. Nevertheless, he saved them for his name's sake, that he might make his power known. He rebuked the Red Sea also, and it dried up. So he led them through the depths and through the wilderness. He saved them from the hand of him who hated them, and redeemed them from the hand of the enemy. And Isaiah 63:10, and it says, but they rebelled and grieved his Holy Spirit. So he turned himself against them as an enemy, and he fought against them. And I also have Deuteronomy 9:7. Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Adon your Elohim to wrath in the wilderness, from the day that you departed from the land of Egypt until you came to this place. You have been rebellious against the Adon. And again, this is tying into verses 8 and 9 about how they rebelled against him and for how he acted for his namesake, despite, because we know that he knows everything from the beginning to the end. He knew that they would be adulterous, yet he still had his plan for redemption and acted for his namesake and took them out of that land. Because they were set apart, because they were known to be his people. And as we've seen throughout these chapters, it's like a parent having their child, knowing that their child represents them. It's like their reputation, I guess you can say. That if their child behaves badly, a parent is still going to stand by their child. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be chastisement, and correction and all of those things. But that parent is still going to love their child. And those who receive the correction will, get back in line and do things correctly. So that's basically that's what I think that the Most High was also referring to here. Okay, so verses 10 through 12. We have quite a few here. So let's start with Romans 10:15. It says, "And how shall they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things." And let me close this out. And so this ties in with this portion just because they came out of the wilderness and they were given these statutes and shown his judgments so that they would be able to multiply it and spread this gospel. And of course, I didn't include it, but there's a proverb that says, uh keep my commandments and live. Have them, I believe it's have them, write them on the tablets of your heart, keep them as the apple of your eye, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. I believe it's in Proverbs 7, if I'm not mistaken. But we know that's something that is a gift, a reward for keeping his commandments. Leviticus 18:5 says, "You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. I am the Adon." Exodus 28 through 11. Thank you, Liz. Proverbs 7, 2 to 3 is the one that I was referring to. Keep my commandments and live. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Adon your Elohim. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Adon made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore, the Adon has blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So now we're going into the connecting precepts of the Torah, where we were actually given his Sabbaths as a sign between us and him, that we would know that he is the Adon who sanctifies us. So we also have Exodus 31, 13 through 17 that says, "Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Adon who sanctifies you. You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people." And this right here, where it may have been a physical death back then, it's now because of the spirit of the law. This is spiritual death. If you're not keeping the Sabbath, if you're not remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy, you are exposing yourself to a spiritual death, as well as being spiritually cut off from the cultivated olive tree, no longer being grafted in if you say that you are. So just keeping in mind again, it says, "Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Adon. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days, the Adon made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." So we are supposed to do as he does. Deuteronomy 5, 12 through 15, another confirmation. "Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Adon your Elohim commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Adon your Elohim." It is his Sabbath. So it belongs to him, just like the feasts belong to him. We do this for him, not because we're following man-made traditions, not because we want to be holier than others. We are simply pleasing and honoring our heavenly Father. So in it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gate. So this is for everyone, Jew or Gentile, as it says, as Paul said, or Paul or Peter, one of the two, maybe both even. That your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Adon your Elohim brought you out from there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Adon your Elohim commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. And yes, and we do it out of love, because what's the point of keeping a Sabbath if your heart is far away from him? Yes, and if it feels like a chore or a burden or just something that you're checking off of a list, there's so much value in keeping the Sabbath, because it gives you that intentional day to like truly seek him. To, yes, of course, we rest and it's beautiful, but exactly, we're not to follow a set of rules just like the Pharisees. We make this time intentional. And we see again in Genesis 2:3, then the Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. So it's a blessed day and it's a holy day, because in it he rested from all his work, which the Most High had created and made. And then we have spoken by Messiah, that he said, and he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is also the Adon of the Sabbath. So I know we've touched on this precept before, but ultimately this is basically just stating, again, this is not a religious act. We are doing it to intentionally seek our Heavenly Father and know that um, we're entering into his rest and spending, very necessary and intentional time with him. So that's, yes, with that, we'll go back now. Why isn't this? Okay. So Liz, you can read from 13. I'm going to say 13 all the way through 29. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yet the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes. They despised my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they greatly defiled my Sabbaths. Then I said, I would pour out my fury on them in the wilderness to consume them, but I acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned before the Gentiles, in whose sight I had brought them out. So I also raised my hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, that I would not bring them into the land I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, the glory of all lands, because they despised my judgments and did not walk in my statutes, but profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. Nevertheless, my eye spared them from destruction. I did not make an end of them in the wilderness. Sorry, hold on. But I said to the children in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, nor observe their judgments, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Adon, your Elohim. Walk in my statutes, keep my judgments, and do them. Hallow my Sabbaths, and they will be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Adon, your Elohim. Notwithstanding, the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes, and were not careful to observe my judgments, which, if a man does, he shall live by them. But they profaned my Sabbaths. Then I said, I would pour out my fury on them and fulfill my anger against them in the wilderness. Nevertheless, I withdrew my hand and acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the Gentiles, in whose sight I had brought them out. Also, I raised my hand in an oath to those in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the Gentiles and disperse them throughout the countries, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were not fixed on their fight, were sorry, and their eyes were fixed on their father's idols. Therefore, I also gave them up to statutes that were not good, and judgments by which they could not live. And I pronounced them unclean because of their ritual gifts, in that they caused all their firstborn to pass through the fire, that I might make them desolate, and that they might not know, and that they might know that I am the Adon. Therefore, Son of Man, speak to the house of Israel, and say to them, Thus says the Adon Elohim, in this too your fathers have blasphemed me, by being unfaithful to me, when I brought them into the land concerning which I had raised my hand in an oath to give them. And they saw all the high hills and all the thick trees, and they offered their sacrifices and provoked me with their offerings. There they also sent up their sweet aroma and poured out their drink offerings. Then I said to them, What is this high place to which you go? So its name is called Bama to this day. Is it to 29?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So a lot of back and forth we see with the Most High, just reminding the Israelites to turn away. He's always almost bargaining with his children to turn away from their wicked ways and understand that these instructions that were given were for their own good. So I actually had, I don't know why I didn't include it, so I'm gonna just go to my Bible really quick. I had First Thessalonians 4 verse 8, connecting with, sorry, let me just pull it up here. Connecting it with verse 3. So, oops. I mean with verse 13, sorry. Not verse 3. Let me go back here. So chapter 4 verse 8, it says in First Thessalonians, therefore anyone who rejects this instruction does not reject a human being, but the Most High, the very Elohim who gives you his Holy Spirit. So as I mentioned before, this is something that we are to do because of him, to honor him, because the Sabbath, just like in Leviticus 23, where he says these are my feasts, he also in this chapter is saying he's speaking of the Sabbath as his Sabbath. And we know that every feast day, every Moedim or appointed time is associated with a Sabbath. You are to keep the feast because they are considered Sabbath. So it all ties together. For those who are keeping the Sabbath but do not believe in keeping the Moedim or have not begun to, this is your reminder to do it. It's a beautiful way to know that you are honoring him as well, and you get to have a celebration in his name. So that was First Thessalonians 4:8, and then we're gonna go now to verse 15. So he raised his hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, saying that he would not send them into the land. And we know that this also is referring to that first generation that actually left Egypt. That first generation did not make it in. It was the generation after them, starting with Jacob and Caleb and everyone younger. So Psalm 95:11 says, So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And Psalm 106:26, therefore he raised up his hand in an oath against them to overthrow them in the wilderness. More connections here. Psalm 106 is a really good chapter. I enjoyed reading it along with this portion. Hebrews 4:3 says, For we who have believed do enter that rest, as he has said, So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. So again, we have an all-knowing Elohim that we serve. He already knew who was going to profane his Sabbath and who would actually keep it. Exodus 34:17, you shall make no molded gods for yourselves, because not only were they profaning the Sabbath, but their heart went after their idols as well. So that one is more, I mean, it ties in with verse 16, I would say. Numbers 26:64 through 65 says, but among these there was not a man of those who were numbered by Moses and Aaron the priest when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Adon had said of them, they will surely die in the wilderness. So there was not left a man of them except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. So confirmation here of what I just mentioned. So as I mentioned with the idols, we have for verse 16, Amos 5:25 through 26. Did you offer me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? You also carried Sikkuth, your king, and Chion, your idols, the star of your gods, which you made for yourself. So we see also that when they came out of Egypt, they came out with these idols, these household idols. And it reminded me also of it was, I believe, Rachel. Yes, when Isaac when Israel and Jacob and Rachel left Laban's house, yeah, that they had the household, she put the household idols under her, like she sat on them and told her father that she had her menstrual cycle when he wanted to check her, but she had those household idols with her. So they took those with them out of there to the land of Canaan. And yes, this caused her to be cursed, and was also why I believe that was why she died giving birth to Benjamin, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, so when they came out of Egypt, the same thing happened. They brought these household idols with them. And that's what started the rebellion too in there. So Acts 7:39 through 43 also says, whom our fathers would not obey, but rejected, and in their hearts, Acts 7, by the way, is also another good review from this chapter to this, or connection to this chapter, the whole of Acts 7. And in their hearts, they turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, make us gods to go before us. As for this Moses, who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days, offered sacrifices to the idol, and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. Then the Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven. As it is written in the book of the prophets, did you offer me slaughtered animals and sacrifices during the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You also took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, images which you made to worship, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. So if we look at Amos 5, this is pretty much verbatim. So Sikkuth, your king, would be, I would say, Moloch, and the star of, well, and Chion, your idol. So yeah, so the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan. So um these are other, I would say, other names for Moloch and Remphan as it's connected here. And then, so starting, because we also are going to see a lot of repetition about the child sacrifices that were made in that time. So we see Exodus 20:13 through 14, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery. And with verse 17, we see, nevertheless, my eyes spared them from destruction. I did not make an end of them in the wilderness. And this is why I included this portion here of Galatians 5:22 through 23, because we also see how his long suffering, which is also in other translations, patience, and his love is on display here and over again throughout all of the books. He gets angry with the Israelites, and wants to execute judgment on them, but for the sake of his name and also because of his love for his firstborn, that's why he doesn't fully make an end with them. There's always that remnant. Psalm 78, 37 through 38, for their heart was not steadfast with him, nor were they faithful in his covenant. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity and did not destroy them. Yes, many a time he turned his anger away and did not stir up all his wrath. Nehemiah 9:19. Yet in your manifold mercies you did not forsake them in the wilderness. The pillar of the cloud did not depart from them by day to lead them on the road, nor the pillar of fire by night to show them light and the way they should go. Can you imagine him knowing that he is guiding them in the wilderness and all the while they're carrying along with them all of these idols that they're still choosing to worship? Very sad. I can just feel the heart of my Abba and how he was so loving despite the idolatry or the adultery that his people committed against him. So now moving on to verse 18. So again, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers nor observe their judgments. So he kept telling them throughout the time in the wilderness. And even now, yeah, we continue to do the same. This is, history always repeats itself. We always seeing the ongoing themes repeating, especially in the times that we're living in now. So First Peter 1:17 through 19 says, and if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. So Peter is reminding the people post Messiah, even of the things that took place in the wilderness and how from back in that time they have been instructed not to follow the traditions that their fathers followed. And this also goes back to what we were talking about last week about the curses from generation to generation, how important it is to be that curse breaker, that generation changer that doesn't continue, that those same traditions because they're not biblical. Zechariah 1:2 through 4 says, the Adon has been very angry with your fathers. Therefore say to them, thus says the Adon of hosts, return to me, says the Adon of hosts, and I will return to you, says the Adon of hosts. Do not be like your fathers, to whom the former prophets preached, saying, thus says the Adon of hosts, turn now from your evil ways and your evil deeds. But they did not hear or heed me, says the Adon. So sad. It breaks my heart for my papa. Verses 19 through 20, we have first Ezekiel 11, 19 through 20. So just going back, he's again keeping instructing them, walk in my statutes, keep my judgments, follow my Sabbaths. This is a sign between me and you. So then as we know, this is in Ezekiel 36 too, but it's also in 11. Then I will give them one heart and I will put a new spirit within them and take the stony heart out of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my judgments and do them, and they shall be my people and I will be their God. Always mentioning how we enter into covenant by obeying him. Deuteronomy 5:32 through 33. Therefore, you shall be careful to do as the Adon your Elohim has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right or to the left. You shall walk in all the ways which the Adon your Elohim has commanded you, that you may live and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. And this is a continuation. You can write this down if you want to. Deuteronomy 5, it flows into Deuteronomy 6. And this is continuing to speak about keeping his commandments. And we have the Shema. I'll read that portion. Hear, O Israel, the Adon are Elohim, the Adon is one. You shall love the Adon your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And we've spoken of in the past also the mark. So we have the mark of the beast, right? But this is the mark of the Elohim. This is, and we're gonna get into, I believe we already cover the part about the man in linen with the writing kit? I feel like we have, or maybe it's just like that's one of those chapters that really stands out to me in Ezekiel. Um, yeah, yes, weeks past. So the angel that goes around marking the people who are in covenant with the Most High. Um, Actually, yeah, I think that was what, maybe chapter 9, chapter 8 or chapter 9. But anyway, um, this is the sign, keeping his commandments, keeping his Sabbath, which is a sign between us and him. Having his word written on our hand between the frontlets of our eyes. That's also where the mark of the beast goes. So it's what sets us apart, and I believe is what's going to justify us in the end. Okay, so next we have Jeremiah 3:22 through 23. Return, you backsliding children, and I will heal your backslidings. Indeed, we do come to you, for you are the Adon our Elohim. Truly, in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills and from the multitudes of mountains. Truly, in the Adon our Elohim is the salvation of Israel. So this is one of the moments where the Most High is saying what his people will end up acknowledging that because this is where the high places and the idolatry took place, in the hills and on the mountains. That's where they would erect those idols. So they're acknowledging that in vain they're seeking salvation from these graven images and these idols. We also have Nehemiah 13:15 through 22. So I'm going to read it. It says, in those days I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in sheaves and loading donkeys with wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into it to Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them about the day on which they were selling provisions. Men of Tyre dwelt there also, who brought in fish and all kinds of goods and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Judah and Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah and said to them, what evil thing is this that you do, by which you profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do thus, and did not the Elohim bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So it was at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut and charged that they must not be opened till after the Sabbath. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates, so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. Now the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. Then I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath, and I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and that they should go and guard the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my Elohim, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of your mercy. So we see that Nehemiah, this was happening after, so if you've read the book of Nehemiah, like in chapter 8, they are reading the law and the prophets. They have come across the Torah once again, and the people are just there hungry, listening to the Torah being read day after day in the courtyard. and they keep the feast for the first time again in years. And the wall is built around Jerusalem once again. But we see now, so that was in Nehemiah 8. So we see now in chapter 13 that they're still not getting it right. So it's understandable when people are going through their process that they have to learn like step by step what's right to do and what's not to do. And ultimately, it has to be a personal revelation for you to understand the sanctity that there is in keeping and hallowing the Sabbath. Um, but Nehemiah, yes, and Liz said this is when the fences were added. Nehemiah was so afraid that he would be cut off, and that the people would make mistakes, that's when, additional rules and traditions of men were instituted for keeping his Torah in all ways. And I believe that's also then where what is that? The book that they read out of? I know it starts with a T. I can't remember right now for some reason. Yes, the Talmud. That's where the Talmud came from or was developed from. All right. So verse 21, we have Deuteronomy 31:27 and Revelation 16:1. So Deuteronomy 31 says, "For I know your rebellion and your stiff neck. If today, while I am yet alive with you, you have been rebellious against the Adon, then how much more after my death?" So this is Moses speaking. And then Revelation 16:1, "Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the seven angels, 'Go and pour out the bowls of wrath of the Elohim on the earth.'" So 21, again, it says, he gave them the instruction, but once again, the children rebelled against him and did not walk in his statutes. So he said, then I said I would pour out my fury on them and fulfill my anger against them in the wilderness. And this is twofold in the sense of the wilderness that they were in post Egyptian slavery and the spiritual wilderness that his people are in now. Leviticus 26:33 would go with verse 23 as well as Deuteronomy 28. So it says, "I will scatter you among the nations and draw out a sword after you. Your land shall be desolate and your cities waste." Deuteronomy 28 says, "Then the Adon will scatter you among the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, wood and stone. And among those nations you shall find no rest, nor shall the sole of your foot have a resting place. But there the Adon will give you a trembling heart, failing eyes, and anguish of soul. Your life shall hang in doubt before you. You shall fear the day and night, and have no assurance of life. In the morning you shall say, 'Oh, that it were evening.' And at the evening you shall say, 'Oh, that it were morning,' because of the fear which terrifies your heart and because of the sight which your eyes see. And the Adon will take you back to Egypt in ships by the way of which I said to you, you shall never see it again. And there you shall be offered for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you." So this is how he raised his oath to them in the wilderness that he would scatter them among the Gentiles and disperse them throughout the countries. Okay, so verse 24. Yeah, verse 24. We have Amos 2:4. And it says, "Thus says the Adon, for 3 transgressions of Judah and for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they have despised the law of the Adon and have not kept his commandments. Their lies lead them astray, lies which their fathers followed." And Psalm 81:12, "So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels." And this is an opposite, right? An opposite precept to Ezekiel 36 and 26, and Ezekiel 11, 19 through 20 as well. Now we're going to go into verses 25 and 26 um about the firstborn. So we see how it says, and I pronounced them unclean because of their ritual gifts, in that they caused all their firstborn to pass through the fire. And this is not a literal fire, rather for their firstborns to go through, through difficulty, sacrifice. So we have Exodus 4, 20 through 22 through 26. I'm actually going to read it from the Targum because it gives a little bit more understanding. And it says, and thou shalt say to Pharaoh, thus says the Adon, Israel is my firstborn son. And to thee I say, let my son go free, that he may worship before me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy firstborn son. But it was on the way, and this is the Most High speaking to Moses on of what Moses should say to the Pharaoh. But it was on the way in the place of lodging that the angel of the Adon met him and sought to kill him, kill Moses, because Gershom, his son, had not been circumcised, inasmuch as Jethro, his father-in-law, had not permitted him to circumcise him. But Eleazar had been circumcised by an agreement between them two. So I believe Gershom, if I'm not mistaken, was the firstborn son, and he was not circumcised. And Zipporah took a stone and circumcised the foreskin of Gershom his son, and brought the severed part, to the feet of the angel, the destroyer, and said, the husband sought to circumcise, but the father-in-law obstructed him. And now let this blood of the circumcision atone for my husband. And the destroying angel desisted from him, so that Zipporah gave thanks and said, how lovely is the blood of this circumcision that hath delivered my husband from the angel of destruction. So this is to me, it's very interesting that after the Most High has given Moses these instructions on, to go and redeem the Israelites, that he's literally like about to kill him, or he allows for the angel of death to go and seek to kill him. But that's also how we see his redemption, how Zipporah acted quickly as a wonderful helpmate that she was, and redeemed her firstborn as well as her husband. Exodus 11, 1, 3 through 7. Oh, and Liz said, reminds me also of the redemption of the firstborn. Right, exactly. Um, okay, so we see the opposite of what the judgment came upon the Egyptians. And the Adon said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. Afterward, he will let you go free, go from here. When he lets you go, he will surely drive you out of here altogether. And the Adon gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. Then Moses said, thus says the Most High, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the animals. Then there shall be a great cry throughout all of the land of Egypt, such as was not like it before, nor shall be like it again. But against none of the children of Israel shall a dog move its tongue, against man or beast, that you may know that the Adon does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. So of course we know what happens, that the Most High executes this through the Passover, and this is of course where the Passover meal takes place, and is a foreshadowing of our Messiah, who then comes and becomes that sacrificial lamb for us. And then again, we also have Exodus 13:2, verses 2 and 11 through 12. So it says, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine. And then verse 11 goes on to say, and it shall be when the Adon brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall set apart to the Adon all that open the womb, that is, every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have, the males shall be the Adons. So I find it also interesting that he is already he's specifying when the Adon brings you into the land of the Canaanites. So we know also that during the wilderness time, circumcision wasn't being practiced. Um, and now this is a reference in reality to what ended up happening to the children of Israel. So Numbers 25, 1 through 3 says, now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Adon was aroused against Israel. So that chapter goes on to describe that they adopted the practices, and that included sacrificing their children to this idol. And Leviticus 18:21 says, and you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Moloch, nor shall you profane them in the name of your Elohim. I am the Adon. And so, yes, they also, by fire, was that they were sacrificing to these gods. Yes, it's absolutely crazy that they were willing to stoop that low. I could imagine, and even thinking about Solomon, that he was probably also doing that with those wives that he had. 2 Kings 17:17 says, and they caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire, practice witchcraft and soothsaying, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Adon to provoke him to anger. And Jeremiah 32:35, and they built the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire to Molech, which I did not command them, nor did it come into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. And finally, actually, no, I also had, I should have gone there first. This was actually about Moses. Yeah, so verses 19 and 20, and this is chapter 67 of Jasher. So this is about when Moses was born. So verses 19 through 20 say, for a son will be born to Israel who will destroy all Egypt and its inhabitants and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. And verse 20 says, now therefore, O king, take counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of the children of Israel and their expectation before this evil arise against Egypt. So there's that. But then it goes on to verse 44. No, no, here. Go, papi, no more, please. Verses 44 through, I believe I was gonna just read through 49. And the king said unto Balaam, so the king had a dream about Moses, and he consulted with Balaam, with Job, and another wise man. So I think it was Jethro, I want to say. Yeah. So and Jethro was Moses' father-in-law, but he was one of the wise men of Pharaoh when Moses was born. Okay, so 44. Oops. And it says, and the king said unto Balaam, what dost thou say, Balaam? Speak thy word that we may hear it. So Jethro tried to convince the Pharaoh not to kill Moses. Balaam encouraged him to do so. And then Job was neutral. He said, do what you think is best. And Balaam said to the king, of all that the king has counseled against the Hebrews, will they be delivered? And the king will not be able to prevail over them with any counsel. For if thou thinkest to lessen them by the flaming fire, thou canst not prevail over them. For surely their Elohim delivered Abraham their father from Ur of the Chaldees. And if thou thinkest to destroy them with a sword, surely Isaac their father was delivered from it, and a ram was placed in his stead. And if with hard and rigorous labor thou thinkest to lessen them, thou wilt not prevail even in this, for their father Jacob served Laban in all manner of hard work and prospered. Now therefore, O king, hear my words, for this is the counsel which is counseled against them, by which thou wilt prevail over them, and from which thou shouldest not depart. If it please the king, let him order all the children which shall be born from this day forward to be thrown into the water. For by this canst thou wipe away their name, for none of them nor of their fathers were tried in this manner. So we see that even prior to the Israelites and the Passover, or the Israelites coming out of Egypt, there was a death sentence on Moses. And so because of Moses's birth being prophesied, all the boys, I think it was all this, yeah, in this time, it was all the sons, not just the firstborn, who were thrown into the water to drown. So that was also another connection there that I found interesting. Let's see, so I read 2 Kings 17:17, and the last connection is Jeremiah 32:35. And it says, and they built high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire to Molech, which I did not command them, nor did it come into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. I might have read that already, sorry. All right, and then, so just a few more here. With 27, verse 27, we have Romans 2:24 that says, for the name of the Elohim is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, as it is written, which meaning to say that because the Israelites weren't doing the right thing, following the Most High righteously, they set the example for the Gentiles around them, and these Gentiles committed the same blasphemies. And then Exodus 6:7-9, as well as Jeremiah 2:7, tie into verses 28 and 29, which speaks about the high places, the sacrifices, and all of the things that they were doing. So Exodus 6 says, I will take you as my people and I will be your Elohim. Then you shall know that I am the Adon, your Elohim, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you into the land which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a heritage. I am the Adon. So Moses spoke thus to the children of Israel, but they did not heed Moses because of anguish of spirit and cruel bondage. So this was prior to them leaving Egypt. They heard these words, but they didn't want to believe it, or they had been through so much oppression that they didn't see it would be possible. Jeremiah 2:17, I brought you into a bountiful country to eat its fruit and its goodness, but when you entered, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. So sad. All right, so with that, we can continue, and yeah, we can just finish through the rest of the chapter. So it was 30 through 49, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says the Adon Elohim, are you defiling yourselves in the manner of your fathers, and committing harlotry according to their abominations? For when you offer your gifts and make your sons pass through the fire, you defile yourselves with all your idols, even to this day. So shall I be inquired of by you, O house of Israel. As I live, says the Adon Elohim, I will not be inquired of by you. What you have in your mind shall never be. When you say, we will be like the Gentiles, like the families in other countries, serving wood and stone. As I live, says the Adon Elohim, surely with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with fury poured out, I will rule over you. I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you are scattered, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will plead my case with you face to face, just as I pleaded my case with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. So I will plead my case with you, says the Adon Elohim. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. I will bring them out of the country where they dwell, but they shall not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Adon. As for you, O house of Israel, thus says the Adon Elohim, go serve every one of you his idols, and hereafter, if you will not obey me, but profane my holy name no more with your gifts and your idols. For on my holy mountain, on the mountain height of Israel, says the Adon Elohim, there all the house of Israel, all of them in the land shall serve me. There I will accept them, and there I will require your offerings and the first fruits of your sacrifices, together with all of your holy things. I will accept you as sweet aroma when I bring you out of the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you have been scattered, and I will be hallowed in you before the Gentiles. Then you shall know that I am the Adon, when I bring you into the land of Israel, into the country for which I raised my hand in an oath to give to you your fathers. Give to your father, sorry. And there you shall remember your ways and all your doings with which you were defiled. And you shall loathe yourselves in your own sight because of all the evils that you have committed. Then you shall know that I am the Adon, when I have dealt with you for my name's sake, not according to your wicked ways, nor according to your corrupt doings, O house of Israel, says the Adon Elohim. Furthermore, the word of the Adon came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward the south, preach against the south, and prophesy against the forest land, the south, and say to the forest of the south, Hear the word of the Adon. Thus says the Adon Elohim, Behold, I will kindle a fire in you, and it shall devour every green tree and every dry tree in you. The blazing flame shall not be quenched, and all faces from the south to the north shall be scorched by it. All flesh shall see that I am the Most High, have kindled it. It shall not be quenched. Then I said, Ah, Adon, they say of me, does he not speak parables?
Okay, so the end of chapter 20 is a little bit of a cliffhanger because it flows into 21. So we'll leave those connecting portions for when we begin chapter 21. But still a lot to discuss here. So let's talk about a few connections first with verse 30. And again, so are you defiling yourselves in the manner of your fathers and committing harlotry according to their abominations? So again, just the continuation of the generational cursing or following the generational traditions. We have Judges 2:19 that says, and it came to pass when the judge was dead that they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers by following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. And this reminds me also of like why we are referred to as sheep, because sheep can be very stubborn in the sense of like just going their own way easily if they have no shepherd to pull them in and keep them um on where in within the sheepfold that they are supposed to remain. If you watched any like of the videos about King David, like little cartoon renditions of the book of the stories of David, you see that he was always running after after the flock. He was the shepherd. He was always running after them. So it goes to show that we always need that direction, but it has to come from above because they relied first on Moses. When Moses wasn't around because he spent all that time on Mount Sinai, they ended up creating the golden calf. Then once they were in the land, they wanted a leader, or well, they had the judges first, right? So each judge would keep them, on the straight and narrow for a little bit, then they would die, and then they would go back to serving the other gods. Even through some of the times of the judges, they would still do the same because the judge that was in place wasn't necessarily doing things in the most righteous way. So then, and then also once the kings came, was the same mess. So yeah, everything continued and perpetuated through idolatry and adultery, and not following his ways. We have Numbers 32:14, and it says, "And look, you have risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fears of the Adon against Israel." Then verse 31. So it says, "When you offer your gifts and make your sons pass through the fire, you defile yourselves with all your idols, even to this day. So shall I be inquired of you, O house of Israel? As I live, says the Adon, I will not be inquired of you. And what you have in your mind shall never be when you say, we will be like the Gentiles, like the families in other countries, serving wood and stone." This is just not what the Most High wanted. What he wanted was for him to be put first. So I have this little verse here. So you see the lampstand, it's not lit. The candles have burnt completely out. We are to be the light of the world. The Most High wants to be glorified in and by his church. But if we are unfaithful and unrighteous, he will oppose us and take away our lampstand. And that's a very dangerous place to be. We don't want to be those who don't keep their lamps lit. So let's read some connections here. We have James 4, 1 through 3. I'm just trying to keep myself on track. Okay. "Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war. Yet you do not have because you do not ask. You do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures." And this is again speaking of offering gifts and defiling themselves. So they're coming to him after having defiled themselves. So they're not receiving from him because what they're doing or why they're asking is for selfish gain. And as I mentioned to you about your lampstand being taken away, we see this in the story of the 10 virgins. Matthew 25:11-2. These were the foolish virgins who did not have enough oil in their lamps. And this is also something that we've discussed before. It's very probable that the day that they were supposed to have the oil in their lamps would have been a Sabbath where you are not supposed to buy or sell. And the wise virgins could not share their oil and sent them to go get their own. So when they left to go get their own, it was already too late. So, but he answered and said, "Assuredly, I say to you, I do not know you." And that's the last thing that we want to hear. Um, Another connection here, Deuteronomy 18:10. "There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer." So just another instruction from the Torah of what they should not have been doing. Matthew 6:23-24. "But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve the Most High and Mammon." So, of course, we know that this is speaking of selfish desires and monetary gain and physical possessions, but it's all a matter of the heart and how and where your heart posture is towards the Most High. Verse 32, we have Daniel 5:4 that says, they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. Revelation 9:10, they had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men 5 months. Oh, there might have been more that I should have included here, possibly about idolatry. So I'm not gonna go back and fix it. Daniel 9:11 through 12 says, yes, all Israel has transgressed your law and has departed so as not to obey your voice. Therefore, the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses, the servant of the Elohim, have been poured out on us because we have sinned against him. And he has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us and against our judges who judged us, by bringing upon us a great disaster. For under the whole heaven, such has never been done as what has been done to Jerusalem. So we know Daniel was one of the prophets present during the exile, lived through it. So this is what he is recapping here of what the result was of their actions. Jeremiah 21:5. I myself will fight against you with an outstretched hand and with a strong arm, even in anger and fury and great wrath. 2 Corinthians 6:16 through 18 says, and what agreement has the temple of the Elohim with idols? For you are the temple of the living Elohim, as the Most High has said, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Therefore, come out from among them and be separate, says the Adon. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Adon Almighty. And that one also ties into verse 33. And I'm sorry, the prior two precepts, Jeremiah 21:5 and Daniel 9:11 to 12, were also for verse 33. So surely with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Then for Now we're going to talk about just verses 34 through 37 and also 38, because I'm going to show you guys something about that as well. So we have Hosea 2:14 says, therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfort to her. So the purpose also, I want to add, of the wilderness season is to be refined and to, in a sense, be pressed to the point of surrender, of knowing and coming to realize the importance of serving him, and keeping his commandments, that we may live. So this wording is very specific in that sense too. 1 Corinthians 10:5 through 10 says, but with most of them, the Elohim was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. And do not become idolaters as were some of them, as it is written. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor let us commit sexual immorality as some of them did. And in one day 23,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. So Paul is speaking to the church of Corinth about being set apart and not following after the ways of the Israelites and what they did. And yes, the wilderness is to purge Egypt out of us for his name's sake. All of it is for his name's sake. And we can, translate that into for his glory. So we also have Matthew 25:32 through 33. And it says, all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. And we know that the Messiah is sitting on the right hand of the throne of the Most High. So those who are being set as sheep on the right hand are his people. Amos 9, 9 through 10. For surely I will command and will sift the house of Israel among all nations, as grain is sifted in a sieve. Yet not the smallest grain shall fall to the ground. All the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, who say, the calamity shall not overtake nor confront us. So all of these connections, and I have a few more. I just want to go to the slides really quick because um we read Matthew 3 as a group this week as well, and it also touches on being sifted. So we see it here. More so as the winnowing fork, right? So I wanted to I when I first read I think it was verse 38. Yes, verse 38 about purging. It's the same thing. So we're being sifted. We are being taken through the fire to be purged of all of our impurities. We're being pruned, and all of this is to look more like him. So this is the sieve, the sifting. The sieve is the, this little contraption here where the grain is put, and they shake it, and the chaff comes out, and what stays up on the top part is the wheat. And then the winnowing fork is the same for the same result. So there's like a huge, right? You see it here, the huge mound of wheat, and they basically like scrape it up. And as it goes up in the wind, the chaff blows away and the wheat falls to the ground because it's heavier. Yes, exactly. A separating. So just a few connecting precepts here. So we have verse 38, which we read. I just read Amos 9. Matthew 3:12, his winnowing fork is in his hand, and he will clear his threshing floor and gather his wheat into the barn, and the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. So there's a difference too in regards to the fire. This unquenchable fire is the fire that has to do with eternal purgatory, eternal death, or eternal suffering in hell. While the refinement fire is the fire that's meant to burn us, but it won't kill us. It won't consume us entirely. It just removes, as I mentioned, the impurities. And then we know even Luke 22:31 that Messiah himself spoke to Simon and said, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. We are sifted as a test to see if we will stand, to see if we will be like the wheat and bow down to him, or be like the tares that will fly away, go away from him. So 30, Luke 22:31 through 34, 32 goes on to say, but I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. But he said to him, Adon, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny me 3 times that you know me. Deny 3 times that you know me. So we know also, if you read through the New Testament, the Gospels, the epistles, you know that yes, Simon denied him, but he ended up turning away from that sin. He cried, he wept bitterly, which signifies that he felt remorse and repented from that, and then continued on to fulfill the commission and the calling of the Most High over his life. So I just wanted to point that out. Um, Now with verse 39. As for you, O house of Israel, thus says the Adon Elohim, go serve everyone every one of you his idols, and hereafter, if you will not obey me, but profane my holy name no more with your gifts and your idols. For on my holy mountain, on the mountain height of Israel, says the Adon Elohim, there all the house of Israel, all of them in the land, shall serve me. There I will accept them, and there I will require your offerings and the first fruits of your sacrifices, together with all your holy things. So we see again, he is speaking of redemption, and who is the redemption through? Of course, we know that is through our Messiah. And we even see this is also in the present tense of that time, speaking of Zerubbabel, which was going to be I guess the governor, so to speak, that would um be the one present when they left captivity and initiate the practices of going back into covenant with the Most High. So there's like a connection between Zerubbabel and our Messiah. So we have Judges 10:14 that says, "Go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen, let them deliver you in your time of distress." And I know I've spoken of this portion of Judges 10 before. This chapter is very beautiful in the sense of showing the love of the Father, his steadfast love, because actually let me pull it up really quick. Because when I read it, I mean, in the midst of all of the darkness in the book of Judges, you see his steadfast love over and over again. So he says that to them, go and turn to those gods. They cry out and say, we have sinned against you, forsaking the Most High and serving the Baals. And he tells them, go and cry out and see if they're going to help you. But the Israelites said to the Adon, we have sinned. Do with us whatever you think is best, but please rescue us now. This also reminds me of the prodigal son, how he came like just ready to work. He didn't expect to get his place of stature, high stature again. So then they got rid of the foreign gods among them and served the Adon, and he could bear Israel's misery no longer. This is what gets me. Like, he saw them doing their part and it just weighed down on his heart, and no longer could he do helping the or allowing the Ammonites to attack. So I believe that chapter 11 goes on to show how he does execute that judgment on the foreign lands and defends Israel, brings them out once again. Revelations 3:15-16 says, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. So essentially, let your yes be your yes and your no be your no. If you're going to serve him, serve him. If not, go about your way. For verse 40, we have Isaiah 56:7 that says, even them I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. So this is once again speaking of the redemption that would take place by them coming back into covenant. And also Malachi 3:4, then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasant to the Adon, as in the days of old, as in former years. Jeremiah 32:37, behold, I will gather them out of all the countries where I have driven them in my anger, in my fury, and in great wrath. I will bring them back to this place, and I will cause them to dwell safely. Jeremiah 30:3. Let me make sure. Oh, no, actually, I have Sirach here. 36, Sirach 36, 1-5, also connecting here. It says, have mercy upon us, O Elohim of all, and put all the nations in fear of you. Lift up your hand against foreign nations and let them see your might. As you have used us to show your holiness to them, so use them to show your glory to us. Then they will know, as we have known, that there is no other Elohim but you, O Adon. So this is again, this just goes to show how important and specific our prayers should be when we're talking to him, petitioning him about things, reminding him of what he's done, reminding him of who gets the glory out of him answering our petitions, and again, just being very specific when we come to his throne for prayer. Okay, now Jeremiah 30:3 says, "For behold, the days are coming, says the Adon, that I will bring," wait, I think, no, I didn't read this, "that I will bring back from captivity my people Israel and Judah, says the Adon, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it." Isaiah 2:2 through 4. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Adon's house shall be established on the top of the mountains by Messiah, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, "Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Adon, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Adon from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation now shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore." That's the promise, the beautiful promise. Continuing with verse 41, Micah 4:1 through 2. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Adon's house shall be established on the top of the mountains. Again, the same as Isaiah, the same as Jeremiah, and shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow to it. Many. So this again, this is, I'm not going to read it all because it's basically word for word as Isaiah. 42, we have 1 John 5:20, and 42 is about knowing him. And coming back again, how he raised his hand in oath. So 1 John 5:20, and we shall know that the Son of the Elohim has come and has given us an understanding that we may know him who is true, and we are in him who is true, in his Son, Yahshua HaMashiach. This is the true Elohim and eternal life. John 17:3, and this is eternal life, that we may know you, the only true Elohim, and Yahshua HaMashiach, whom you have sent. Once again, making the distinction between the Son and the Father. Hosea 5:15, I will return again to my place till they acknowledge their offense. Then they will seek my face. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. So he just sits on his throne awaiting for us to come to him in repentance. And this was one of Job's prayers. Job 42:5-6, that says, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. And what does he do? If you connect this to that scripture in Isaiah, I believe it's in Isaiah 61, that says that he will give us beauty for our ashes. So in our repentance, in the ashes of our repentance, comes something beautiful, which is redemption. Verse 44, Psalm 115:1, that says, Not unto us, O Adon, not unto us, but to your name give glory, because of your mercy, because of your truth. So this is another confirmation of for your name's sake, because verse 44 is one of the ones that says it again. All right, so I said that I would talk about the connections in the last portion of the chapter after we read chapter 21, just because it kind of just flows through. 45 through 49 is the prophecy against the south, which once again were the two kingdoms, the northern and the southern kingdoms. All right, so who can read chapter 21? Anita, are you available?
Yes, I can read.
Okay, awesome. Um, Let me see. I think you can just read through the whole chapter. Let me just make sure. Oh, actually, it's a little long. So let's read through verse 17.
Okay. And the word of the Adon came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face towards Jerusalem, preach against the holy places, and prophesy against the land of Israel. And say to the land of Israel, Thus says the Adon, Behold, I am against you, and I will draw my sword out of its sheath, and cut off both righteous and wicked from you. Because I will cut off both righteous and wicked from you, therefore my sword shall go out of its sheath against all flesh from south to north, that all flesh may know that I, the Adon, have drawn my sword out of its sheath. It shall not return any more. Sigh therefore, Son of man, with a breaking heart, and sigh with bitterness before their eyes. And it shall be when they say to you, Why are you sighing? That you shall answer, Because of the news. When it comes, every heart will melt, all hands will be feeble, every spirit will faint, and all knees will be weak as water. Behold, it is coming and shall be brought to pass, says the Adon Elohim. Again, the word of the Adon came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy and say, Thus says the Adon, say, a sword is sharpened, and also polished, sharpened to make a dreadful slaughter, polished to flash like lightning. Should we then make mirth? It despises the scepter of my son, as it does all wood. And he has given it to be polished, that it may be handled. This sword is sharpened, and it is polished to be given to the hand of the slayer. Cry and wail, Son of man, for it will be against my people, against all the princes of Israel. Terrors, including the sword, will be against my people. Therefore, strike your thigh. Because it is a testing, and what if the sword despises even the scepter? The scepter shall be no more, says the Adon Elohim.
Sorry, let me.
That's okay. You therefore, Son of man, prophesy and strike your hands together. The third time, let the sword do double damage. It is the sword that slays, the sword that slays the great men, that enters their private chambers. I have set the point of the sword against all their gates, that their heart may melt and many may stumble. Ah, it is made bright. It is grass for slaughter. Swords at Swords at the ready, thrust right, set your blade, thrust left, wherever your edge is ordered. I also will beat my fists together, and I will cause my fury to rest. I, the Most High, have spoken.
Thank you, Anita. So, as I mentioned, the end of chapter 20 ties in here to chapter 21 because, of course, it is speaking of who is going to be the oppressor that is sent to Jerusalem. So, let's go back to some of the connections for the end of chapter 20. Um, Basically, I'm just going to read through the ones from verse 47 through 49. So, we have Jeremiah 21:14, which says, But I will punish you according to the fruit of your doing, says the Adon. I will kindle a fire in its forest, and it shall devour all things around it. And if we go back, okay, so speaking again to the south, firing a kindling a fire against the people it's the ongoing theme here. And then we have Jeremiah 7:20, which is for 48. Therefore, thus says the Adon Elohim, Behold, my anger and my fury will be poured out on this place, on man and on beast, and on the trees of the field, and on the fruit of the ground, and it will be burned and not be quenched. So we know that Jerusalem was set on fire. And we see that in the books of Chronicles and Kings, during the end of the captivity or the exile. Not the end of the exile, but the end of the people of Jerusalem being taken into exile, rather, because it did happen in phases. Then also Ezekiel 17:2 and John 16:5 are connected to verse 49, as well as Matthew 13:10 through 17. And this is based on where he said, where Ezekiel said, then I said, Ah, Adon Elohim, they say of me, does he not speak in parables? Because again, the words were not easy to understand when he would say certain things, and it was meant for those who had ears to hear. So Ezekiel 17:2 says, Son of man, pose a riddle and speak a parable to the house of Israel. John 16:5 says, But now I go away with him who sent me, and none of you asked me, Where are you going? And then Matthew 13:10 through 17 says, And the disciples came and said to him, Why do you speak to them in parables? He answered and said to them, Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Because of that, they can't hear. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. It's always a heart matter. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So I also wonder, maybe perhaps, I don't know if these prophets were speaking and some of them didn't understand the own words that they were being compelled to speak against the people. So now coming into chapter 21, we have connections with verses 3 and 4, which is Isaiah 57:1, and it says, The righteous perishes, and no man takes it to heart. Merciful men are taken away, while no one considers that the righteous is taken away from evil. While no one considers that the righteous is taken away from evil. Yes. And then so again it says, Behold, I am against you, and I will draw my sword out of his sheath and cut off both righteous and wicked from you. But I will cut off, because I will cut off both righteous and wicked from you, therefore my sword shall go out of its sheath against all flesh from south to north. So also, everyone, basically stating everyone in Israel would be judged, no matter who it was. And Jeremiah 23:20. This one is with verse 5. And it says, The anger of the Adon will not turn back until he has executed and performed the thoughts of his heart. In the latter days, you will understand it perfectly. So we are seeing this now. We are understanding all of these mysteries now more than ever before. Verses 6 through 7, we have Nahum 2:9 through 10. It says, Take spoil of silver, take spoil of gold. There is no end of treasure or wealth of every desirable prize. She is empty, desolate, and waste. The heart melts and the knees shake. Much pain is in every side, and all their faces are drained of color. So this is when the temple was also made desolate. It was broken into, and they took all of the gold and the silver from the temple and carried it out to Babylon. Ezekiel 6:11 says, Thus says the Adon Elohim, Pound your fists and stamp your feet and say, Alas, for the evil abominations of the house of Israel, for they shall fall by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. And Isaiah 13:7, Therefore all hands will be limp, every man's heart will melt. And this is also an ongoing theme that we see, that when his judgment comes, that's what ends up happening. That hearts melt and hands are feeble, every spirit faints, all knees are weak as water. I also have Enoch 60 here, We discussed this during the Torah portions when we did them with Liz that led. But I'm gonna read chapter 60, just verse 3. This was Noah. And it says, oh, actually, I'm gonna read verse 2 also. Disquieted with a great disquiet, and the head of days sat on the throne of his glory, and the angels and the righteous stood around him. And a great trembling seized me, and fear took hold of me, and my loins gave way, and dissolved were my reins, and I fell upon my face. So if you think about this in a medical sense, and this was something that I brought up when we read it. Yes, if you think of, okay, so if you know anything about seizures, when a person has a seizure, they see a light. There's like an aura that they see before they have the seizure. And then in the moment of the seizure, they lose control of everything, even their bowels. So there here we see great trembling seized me, a fear took hold of me, my loins gave way and dissolved were my reins. So if you think about what his reins were, basically his intestines, he pooped himself in fear, in reverence. Yes, that moment we realized together that Noah pooped his pants. We'll never forget it. And how much can you imagine that happening? Like when we come face to face, I hope that I'm fasting or something. I hope that my entrails are clean and empty at that time because yeah, that'll be tough stuff. Okay, continuing. So verse 11, we have Jeremiah 12:12. The plunderers have come on all the desolate heights in the wilderness. For the sword of the Adon shall devour from one end of the land to the other end of the land. No flesh shall have peace. And Isaiah 66:16. And these are connections for 9 through 10. Yeah. Um, for by fire and by his sword the Adon will judge all flesh, and the slain of the Adon shall be many. Then Luke 21:34 through 35. But take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life, and that day come on you unexpectedly. For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. All right. And then Revelation 2:26 through 27. And he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessel, as I also have received from my Father. So we know that this also is a reference to our Messiah. He would be the rod, and we also see, like, if you really read into this section here, the sword is sharpened and also polished, sharpened to make a dreadful slaughter. That's our Messiah coming back as the judge. And we know that the sword of the Spirit is the word, and he is the word made flesh. So all signs point to him in this section. Okay, so verse 11, Jeremiah 25:9 says, Behold, and now this again is confirmation that Nebuchadnezzar was the sword, or in the sense of judgment, he was being utilized as a sword of judgment by the Most High, as his own vessel. So behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, says the Adon, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, against its inhabitants, and against these nations all around, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, a hissing, and perpetual desolations. Again, Ezekiel is then told to wail, cry out and wail. So Micah 1:8 says, therefore I will wail and howl. I will go stripped and naked. I will make a wailing like the jackals and a mourning like the ostriches. I looked up, I wanted to see what it is, what is the sound that ostriches make, and it's like a very loud and like distinct kind of sound that does sound like a mourning sound. Like they sound like they're suffering so much. And it's just their it's just their sound. So that's the reference that the Most High was informing or instructing Micah to wail as. And then Joel 1:13, gird yourselves and lament, you priest, wail, you who minister before the altar. Come, lie all night in sackcloth, you who minister to my Elohim, for the grain offering and the drink offering are withheld from the house of your Elohim. So again, we see here how this is how we are to come to him in in repentance, in how it said it in Job. Let me go back up to Job. Repenting in dust and ashes, wailing for our loved ones, wailing for the people around us, just wanting for everyone to come into the knowledge of the truth and turn away from any kind of evil practice that would separate them from the Most High. Then for verses 13 through 14, we have Leviticus 26:21 through 24. And it says, then if you walk contrary to me and are not willing to obey me, I will bring on you 7 times more plagues according to your sins. And I will also send wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children, destroy your livestock, and make you few in number. And your highways shall be desolate. And if by these things you are not reformed by me, but walk contrary to me, then I also will walk contrary to you, and I will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. So if we go back to 13 and 14. So this is, he was again doing a public demonstration or a physical demonstration with these swords, striking his hands together and banging down the swords. Here he does it 3 times, but in Leviticus we see it's like a 7 times type of punishment. All right, and we stopped at 17, right? Yeah. So for verse 15, I have Ezekiel 15:7, and it says, I will set my face against them. They will go out from one fire, but another fire shall devour them. Then you shall know that I am the Adon when I set my face against them. And Ezekiel 16:42 with verse 17 says, so I will lay to rest my fury toward you, and my jealousy shall depart from you. I will be quiet and be angry no more. So that's how, he finally lets out all his anger, and then that's it. He's like, okay, I've done what I need to do to execute my judgment towards the people. All right, so with that, we can continue the chapter. Just finish. Yeah, read all the way through to verse 32, Anita.
Okay.
Thank you.
The word of the Adon came to me again, saying, and son of man, appoint for yourself 2 ways for the sword of the king of Babylon to go. Both of them shall go from the same land. Make a sign, put it at the head of the road to the city. Appoint a road for the sword to go to Rabbah of the Ammonites, and to Judah, and to fortify Jerusalem. For the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the road, at the fork of the 2 roads, to use divination. He shakes the arrows, he consults the images, he looks at the liver. In his right hand is the divination for Jerusalem, to set up battering rams, to call for a slaughter, to lift the voice with shouting, to set battering rams against the gates, to heap up a siege mound, and to build a wall. And it will be to them like a false divination in the eyes of those who have sworn oaths to them. But he will bring their iniquity to remembrance, that they may be taken. Therefore, thus says the Adon Elohim, because you have made your iniquity to be remembered, in that your transgressions are uncovered, so that in all your doings your sins appear, because you have come to remembrance, you shall be taken in hand. Now to you, O profane, wicked prince of Israel, whose day has come, whose iniquity shall end. Thus says the Adon Elohim. Remove the turban and take off the crown, nothing shall remain the same. Exalt the humble and humble the exalted. Overthrown, overthrown, I will make it overthrown. It shall be no longer until he comes whose right it is, and I will give it to him.
Amen.
And you, son of man, prophesy and say, thus says the Adon Elohim concerning the Ammonites and concerning their reproach, and say, a sword is drawn, polished for slaughter, for consuming, for flashing. While they see false visions for you, while they divine a lie for you, to bring you on the necks of the wicked, the slain, whose day has come, whose iniquity shall end. Return it to its sheath. I will judge you in the place where you were created, in the land of your nativity. I will pour out my indignation on you. I will bow against you with the fire of my wrath and deliver you into the hands of brutal men who are skillful to destroy. You shall be fuel for the fire. Your blood shall be in the midst of the land. You shall not be remembered, for I, the Adon, have spoken.
So once again, Ezekiel is to do another physical demonstration. So he does like he draws two lines in the sand, a fork in the road basically, for when Nebuchadnezzar approaches the land, he casts lots with arrows from what it one of the other translations that I have said that he casts lots with the arrows. So he's shaking the arrows here. So basically he's casting lots and consulting diviners. So it's either go to Reba of the Ammonites or to Jerusalem. Of course, the lot falls on Jerusalem and he goes and invades the land. So we have a few connections here. I kind of grouped them by the sections. So we have first 18 through 24. Jeremiah 1:10 says, "See, I have this day set over you the nations and over set you over the nations and over the kingdoms to root out and pull down, to destroy and to throw down, to build and to plant." Then we have Lamentations 4:12, which says, "The kings of the earth and all the inhabitants of the world would not have believed that the adversary and the enemy could enter the gates of Jerusalem. But alas, he did." So this is also speaking about Nebuchadnezzar. Because again, Nebuchadnezzar was a tool used by the Most High. Proverbs 16:33, "The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Adon." So this is highlighting that while Nebuchadnezzar was relying on casting his lots, it was really the Most High who allowed it. Everything was set up and aligned by him. Job 39:25, "At the blast of the trumpet, he says, aha, he smells the battle from afar, the thunder of captains and shouting." So even Job was able to see prophetically what would take place to Jerusalem. And we know that Job existed or was alive during the time of Moses's birth, as we saw in the book of Jasher tonight. So way before they entered into the promised land after the slavery. 2 Kings 24, 1 through 7. So this is the historical reference. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it, but we see all in all that this is when Nebuchadnezzar came in and Jehoiakim worked for him and then turned against him, and he invaded the land. Now, we're going to go into some connections with our Messiah in verses 25 through 27. So here in verse 26, We see remove the turban and take off the crown. The turban was for the priest, the crown, of course, for the king. So basically stating that everyone essentially would be affected by what was going to take place to Jerusalem. But there was hope. There was hope because overthrown, he was going to make it overthrown until he comes whose right it is. So this is pointing to Messiah. So we have Matthew 23:11 that says, but he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. So those who were high would be brought low. Then Luke 1:32 and verse 52. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Highest. And the Adon Elohim will give him the throne of his father David. So again, we see the confirmation that the kingdom would be overthrown, but the crown would be given to the right one. He has put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted the lowly. Then we have Revelation 19:11 through 16. Now I saw heaven opened up, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of the Elohim. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress in the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Elohim. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Adon of Adons. Beautiful connection there. And then I have also 2 Esdras, chapter 7, verses 26 through 44. And it says, for behold, the time will come when the signs which I have foretold you will come to pass, that the city which now is not seen shall appear, and the land which now is hidden shall be disclosed. And every one who has been delivered from the evils that I have foretold shall see my wonders. For my son, the Messiah, shall be revealed with those who are with him, and those who remain shall rejoice 400 years. And after these years, my son, the Messiah, shall die, and all who draw human breath. And the world shall be turned back to the primeval silence for 7 days, and as it was at the first beginnings, so that no one shall be left. And after 7 days, the world which is not yet awake shall be roused, and that which is corruptible shall perish. And the earth shall be given up, those who are asleep in it, and the dust those who dwell silently in it. And the chambers shall give up the souls which have been committed to them. And the Most High shall be revealed upon the seat of judgment, and compassion shall pass away, and patience shall be withdrawn. But only judgment shall remain. Truth shall stand, and faithfulness shall grow strong, and recompense shall follow, and the reward shall be manifested. Righteous deeds shall awake, and unrighteous deeds shall not sleep. Then the pit of torment shall appear, and opposite it shall be the place of rest, and the furnace of hell shall be disclosed, and opposite the paradise of delight. Then the Most High will say to the nations that have been raised from the dead, look now and understand whom you have denied, whom you have not served, whose commandments you have despised. Look on this side and on that. Here are delight and rest, and there are fire and torments. Thus he will speak to them on the day of judgment, a day that has no sun or moon or stars, or cloud or thunder or lightning or wind or water or air or darkness or even evening or morning or summer or spring or heat or winter or frost or cold or hail or rain or dew or noon or night or dawn or shining or brightness or light, but only the splendor of the glory of the Most High, by which all shall see what has been determined for them, for it will last for about a week of years. This is my judgment and its prescribed order, and to you alone have I shown these things. Yes, this chapter, that's why I felt to read all of those verses, because I mean the whole of two Esdras is great. It's obviously very, very apocalyptic and points to our Messiah. But this portion right here, yeah, it's just you see the redemption, how he's given back the throne both spiritually and physically. And um to me it seems like, there's a time limit to his grace and to his mercy. Yes, yes, exactly. Debunks the rapture doctrine as well. Okay, and then lastly, we have just a few more connecting precepts, and these are to the last portion, verses 28 through 32. So we have Zephaniah 2, 8 through 10, and it says, I have heard the reproach of Moab. Oh, and well, just to preface this, so this last portion, 28 through 32, is now him addressing the Ammonites, because although the lot fell on Jerusalem, the Ammonites still have a price to pay. So this was basically that the Ammonites had certain insults of mockery that they were throwing against Jerusalem, because they weren't the ones who were attacked, but Jerusalem was. So, okay. So Zephaniah 8, 2, 8 through 10 says, I have heard the reproach of Moab and the insults of the people of Ammon with which they have reproached my people and made arrogant threats against their borders. Therefore, as I live, says the Adon of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, surely Moab shall be like Sodom and the people of Ammon like Gomorrah, overrun with weeds and salt pits and a perpetual desolation. The residue of my people shall plunder them, and the remnant of my people shall possess them. This they shall have for their pride, because they have reproached and made arrogant threats against the people of the Adon of hosts. Then Psalm 37:13, the Adon laughs at him, for he sees that his day is coming. Matthew 3:10, and even now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree which does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. And finally, Numbers 23:19, one of my favorite precepts. The Most High is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make good? So everything that is written in this book and in those connecting books that we've spoken of tonight, those are his words. Those are his words written, inspired through the Ruach. And so we have to take it for what it is. Not take it lightly, take it very seriously, knowing that we're all in this realm of being consecrated and sanctified for his glory, so that he, for his name's sake, is glorified and is pleased with our faith plus our works. With that being said, this concludes tonight's study. Thank you all so much for joining. I pray, as always, that this plants seeds that will cause you to turn your face towards him and just seek and serve him. Shalom.